Everything we manage in this life belongs to someone else. Now, many of us have heard this before, but if you're like me, it is just so easy to forget this principle. Because in our hearts, there is just this natural drift toward the mentality that the direct deposit that went into my account a few days ago, the money in my retirement fund, the equity in my house, the value of my car, the inheritance you may have received from someone, the business that you legally own, there is just a strong tendency to think of those things as strictly, solely ours. There's a reason one of the first words that any of us learn as toddlers is mine. After the government takes its share, the rest is yours, right? Well, if you're speaking strictly in human terms, there is a sense in which that's true. But if there is a higher being, friend, there is a higher truth. Psalm 24:1 says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it." It's not just talking about nature, it's talking about every person and everything that is owned or managed by every person. And this is why Jesus told this story the way he did. The parable includes not just a rich person who makes decisions, but a wealthy owner and a questionable manager, because God is our wealthy owner, and we are the managers who so easily forget who actually owns it. A friend told me that when Shaquille O'Neal hears his kids say that their family is rich, he reminds them, "No, we ain't rich, I'm rich." But I've learned that a person does not have to be rich to forget that the resources that we manage belong to God. We are all wealth managers. Now, many of us don't use that word to describe our possessions, but the owner of whatever we have is wealthy. We are wealth managers. And God entrusts us with different amounts of that wealth. Jesus told another parable that talked about how God gives different amounts to different people. And he welcomes us to use some of it for ourselves because he cares about us, but he does not want us to forget who the true owner actually is. I read about a Texas landowner who drilled and tapped into a huge oil reserve. And it was big news around town. So a friend saw him a few days later and asked, "How did it feel to wake up one day and to have twice as much as you did the day before?" And the man replied, "I own the same amount today that I owned a week ago, 0. But I do feel a greater responsibility because God has entrusted me with even more." Now, when you hear words like that from an actual person, you're not hearing from someone with an owner's spirit. You're hearing from someone with a manager's spirit. And as you kind of look in the mirror of your soul today, what do you see? Do you see an owner's spirit or do you see a manager's spirit? You know, this is a good test for whether or not you've realized this truth. If more resources have come under your care over recent years, have you felt a greater sense of importance, a greater sense of privilege, or have you felt a greater sense of responsibility? Have you enjoyed the thought that you now have to answer to less people, be dependent on people for less of your future? Or have you had a greater realization that you answer to God for even more?